Are you drafting late and looking for some late March sleepers? Did you draft already and you're already thinking about your first weekend's fab pickups? Well, we got a show for both of you. We're talking spring training job battle winners and losers on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hello and welcome everybody to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast presented by Fantrax. Erik Halterman here with Ryan Boyer on what is either our first waiver wire pickups episode of the year or our last spring trading episode of the year. We're trying to do a little bit of both here. We're going to talk some spring trading job battles. We figure that'll help out people who are looking to pick up some players and people who are looking to figure out who the late March risers and fallers are. Ryan, have all your leagues already been sunk by the first two games of the Tokyo series, or are you still doing okay?
I'm hanging in there. Matt Shaw had a rough series. That was great to see, but yeah, it was nice to see some baseball being played for sure. But we got domestic opener coming up in less than a week. Very much looking forward to it. Hopefully finish up our big draft weekend this weekend and get some baseball going.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting in the flow of the regular season again. First, before we get to today's main topic, as always, we've got some headlines, and as usual, we got some pitcher injuries to talk about. A potentially pretty significant one showed up just minutes before we started recording here. Shane McClanahan, working his way back from Tommy John surgery, second Tommy John surgery, has just exited his start today, Saturday, with what appears to be an arm injury. We don't yet have the details. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, there'll be more info out there. But he threw a pitch and then immediately seemed to be wincing in pain, holding his arm. It did not look good at all. I guess one of the main takeaways here is this is why you don't draft guys coming off of surgery, even if they've looked good in the first 2 or 3 weeks of spring. I mean, maybe you want to think beyond McClanahan to someone like Spencer Strider. This is a reminder of, even though the news might look good right now, there's some real downsides with this category of player, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the risk was pretty well baked into McClanahan's price, but gosh, yeah, it didn't look good. He's dangling his arm to his side. The video that was tweeted out by one of the beat writers, and as you mentioned, second Tommy John. I mean, if he's has a significant setback here, that could potentially be a career-ending type injury, and you don't want to see that, especially from a guy as talented as McClanahan. Hopefully, we're jumping to the extreme conclusion, and maybe he just was holding his arm funny and he tweaked his back or oblique or something, and that would probably be a best case scenario, but certainly looked like his arm, which is not great, Bob, for sure. I guess that there was kind of a battle at the end of the Rays rotation. That was not, I don't think we put that one on the list, or I put that one on the list, but Drew Rasmussen and Zach Littell, we were kind of waiting to see who out of those two is going to get that last rotation spot. Maybe Joe Boyle's in the mix. So that would simplify things, but not in the way we wanted that to happen for sure, with McClanahan getting hurt.
Yeah, I would imagine Rasmussen probably gets some starts now. He becomes much more interesting, but of course has a long injury history himself. Joe Boyle, I think, is still in the mix too as well. A pitcher injury which may not be trending quite as bad as it could have been is George Kirby. He's dealing with shoulder inflammation, and he was shut down when that first happened. Received an injection, and I was quite worried. I figured, all right, he's not throwing now. They're going to, ramp him back up, and there's no guarantee it's going to go well. Who even knows when he's going to start throwing again? Well, he is already throwing again. He played catch Friday. He's supposed to play catch again today, Saturday. So not the longest absence for Kirby. is he gonna ramp his way up and be ready to go late April or something and give people 5+ months of George Kirby? Would you be drafting him as if that's true, or would you be drafting him as if there's still a real chance that he doesn't come out of the woods?
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough to say when the shoulder's involved, but this certainly is trending towards the more encouraging. Like you said, that's a pretty brief shutdown period, and he has had, I think, 2 other instances of a similar type injury that he bounced back from nicely. It's hard to say that a guy had 2 other shoulder instances and bounced back from them, so that's encouraging.
Right.
But
it's tough. Yeah. A
it's
long history of the
kind of
same issue for Kirby. I don't like it.
But I mean, it certainly seems like it's on the milder side if he's throwing again already. I know he had a pain-killing injection and said he wasn't feeling any discomfort anymore. So yeah, maybe we can get 5 months out of George Kirby. I would lean towards he's probably a pretty decent value with where he's going now, but it's a tough needle to thread when you're trying to make that determination for sure.
Yeah, I was not interested in Kirby. Normally, I want much more strikeout upside from my fantasy aces, but I should be considering him now that you don't need to pay anywhere near a fantasy ace price for him. Another pitcher injury to track here. Well, maybe. Is it a pitcher injury? I'm not totally sure. Sonny Gray, his velocity has been down this spring. His performances have been down as well. His ERA in 14 1/3 innings sits at 12.56. His whip is north of 2. And Sonny Gray ended the year last year on the injured list with forearm flexor tendonitis. Now, that happened in late September. So if you look at his year-long stats, it looked like he was pretty much healthy last year. But forearm tendonitis could be pretty worrisome here, especially when it's paired with a performance that looks like he's still dealing with something. Would you be moving Sonny Gray significantly on your board based on this and maybe taking a shot at some other Cardinals starters?
I wouldn't say I'd move him significantly, but it is worrisome, I think. Maybe we should have factored that into his price more, the type of injury that he dealt with down the stretch. But the Cardinals just seemed to like brush it off, and
right.
It seemed like basically he would just shut down because they were out of it and they didn't want to push it. But we find out yesterday that he had an injection for it, and that slowed his offseason throwing program. And he thinks that's why his velocity is down this spring, but maybe that is the case. He contends that he's healthy. He's already been named the opening day starter. But he's 35, ended last season with a forearm issue. Those flexor issues can sometimes wind up being Tommy John type concerns. So I think it's fair to knock Sonny Gray down your board. Could end up being fine, but I think it's fair to downgrade him a little bit. Cardinals were considering 6-man rotation already as a kind of a way to get Michael McGreevy in there, who's been their best starter this spring. Seems like Andre Palante has already wrapped up a spot. They're still considering Matthew Liberatore for the rotation, allegedly. Maybe this would open up a spot for him if the Gray thing ends up being worse than anticipated. But yeah, fair to knock down Sonny Gray a little bit and I maybe uptick Michael McGreevy a little bit, so that might increase his chances to break in the rotation.
Yeah, I've been intrigued by McGreevy as a reserve round pick, and I think I'm definitely intrigued by him now that he might have more of an opportunity to start right away. One more pitcher injury to touch on here. We've got Yu Darvish is going to be opening on the IL, elbow inflammation for him. And even if it's not that bad of an injury, Darvish was going late enough in drafts that I don't really see much reason to take a chance. I guess in a league with an IL spot, you hope that you can stash him for a couple of weeks and then suddenly you've got an extra player on your team, but not that interested in Darvish, I don't think, following this news. Are you interested in anyone else who might take his spot? Matt Waldron, you're going to go for the knuckleballer? What do you see happening in San Diego?
I have a little bit of interest in Kyle Hart just to see what he might look like coming back from overseas, but not terribly interested in him. And yeah, I think you're right that Darvish can, at least in your 12 teamers, I'm not sure he's worth drafting now. Your deeper leagues, if you have IL spots, you can go ahead and take a pick on him, but not terribly interested in him now. And Kyle Hart only in deeper formats, I think, has a little bit of interest. Not really interested in Waldron.
Who's dealing with an oblique issue too, by the way, so might not even get the chance to take the spot.
Stephen Kolak is being stretched out as a potential option. Yeah, not super interesting names there.
Yeah, I would agree. Should we move on to some hitter injuries to talk about real quick before we get to the job battles? We've got in Detroit, Parker Meadows needs 4 more weeks of rest on his arm, dealing with a nerve issue. That was one where there were previously some reports saying he could be okay or, not going to miss that much time, but it seems like he does still need quite a bit of time. What do you see happening in Detroit? Wenzel Perez timed? Is there any fantasy opportunity opening up here?
Opening day center fielder Javier Baez. I saw that Javier Baez got a start in center field today. That Detroit lineup is looking not so great right now. It already wasn't looking great, and now they're without Meadows, without Vierling for a while. Yeah, the Meadows thing, I have lots of Parker Meadows shares, so this is not great news for me. I was hoping that planning for at least a short IL stint seems like it could be a little longer now. They're saying that he's going to do all their baseball activities except for throwing, so they're hoping it's kind of a quick turnaround after that. Those 4 weeks are up, but still that's another 4 weeks, so certainly would not count on seeing him before May 1st. And don't know that if you have a draft this weekend, is he still worth a pick in a 12-teamer? Probably not. If he's going to be knocked out for at least the first month, maybe if you have room to stash him on the IL, because I do like Parker Meadows quite a bit. But yeah, Wenzel Perez in deeper leagues, I guess, could potentially open up at bats in the DH spot too if Kerry Carpenter is going to play a little more outfield. It could be more at bats for Spencer Torkelson, but yeah, bummer that we're not going to see Parker Meadows for a while.
Yeah, another outfielder who will miss the start of the season, Dalton Varsho in Toronto, still recovering from shoulder surgery, which he underwent back in September. No indication that Varsho is going to miss an extended period, but do you see other opportunities here? The rest of the center field depth chart in Toronto, Nathan Lukes, Miles Straw. I'm not sure if there's much fantasy upside there. Alan Roden, buried a little bit deeper. He's a prospect that people have been interested in. Do you think he's got a shot at making the opening day roster now?
Yeah, maybe. Roden is certainly the most interesting of that group. Joey Luperfido was sent down yesterday. That surprised me because he had been getting most of the reps in center field this spring. But clearly they decided that he needed a little more time in the minors. Roden is the most interesting if he gets reps. I mean, he could still theoretically be in line for regular playing time even after Varsho comes back. If he does well, there's room kind of alternating between the left field and DH with Anthony Santander. So if Alan Roden wasn't on your radar, I think he's worthy of being on your radar. They tried him out a little bit in center field. I don't know if that's really a position that he's comfortable playing, but potentially could be a spot for him in left field, and he would be interesting if he's getting regular playing time.
Yeah, Roden has really good plate skills, nearly as many walks as strikeouts in the minors, and twice as many walks as strikeouts this spring. 16 homers, 14 steals in 125 minor league games too last year, so might be able to do some of everything. I don't know if he'll do a lot of anything, but an interesting player for sure. Another injury here, Spencer Steer is going to open the year on the IL with shoulder issues. He's been dealing those since before the start of camp even. This, I think, ends the position battle for the Reds, in the corner infield and DH, probably. When we entered the spring, there were maybe 5 guys for first, third, and DH, although all of them could have played a bit elsewhere as well. But now with Noelvi Marte having been sent down a little while ago and Spencer Steer out for the start of the year, it'll be Christian Encarnacion Strand probably at first or DH, Heimer Candelario at whichever spot Encarnacion Strand doesn't take, and it seems like third base wide open here for Gavin Lux. So if you were interested in any of these Reds, they should have the opportunity to start the year with a basically everyday role. And if they do well for the first few weeks, then by the time Steer gets back, they'll still probably be playing quite a bit, right? So this is at least a minor positive for most of the other Reds.
Yeah, I think it solidifies their roles for sure. And I had been already encouraged by how Encarnacion Strand had looked this spring. He's pretty much looks all the way back, coming back from wrist surgery. You always kind of worry about hitters coming back from wrist surgery, whether they're going to have all that power still there. And he looks the same. Still not great plate discipline, but huge raw power. And he's certainly at a place that caters to that power. So he has ticked up my board a little bit. Doesn't seem like it's going to be a super long stint on the IL for Steer, but we'll see how he comes along.
All right, and the final injury to talk about here, it's been a bit of a long headline section. Guys need to stop getting hurt for our purposes here. But Gerard Encarnacion is out with a broken hand. It was originally diagnosed as a jammed finger after he made a diving play Friday, but it has now been revealed to be a broken hand. He's going to miss some sort of extended period, I would assume, maybe a month, maybe 2 months. And that's too bad because Gerard Encarnacion was a pretty popular, a moderately popular late sleeper because it looked like he was going to play quite a bit at DH and hit a lot of home runs. What do we do now? Is it just Wilmer Flores and we leave him on the waiver wire?
Yeah, I think Encarnacion Strand, the other Encarnacion, Gerard, probably not worth drafting now. Now he's probably going to miss at least like a month or so. He was a nice late round power flyer. Batted ball data for him looks really, really promising, but unfortunately, Wilmer Flores looks like he's going to be basically a full-time DH for a while, and he's not. Maybe in your deeper leagues, he can be interesting, but I think he might only have single eligibility right now, and anyway. But yeah, you can kind of cross Encarnacion off your draft board unless you're in a super deep league now.
Yeah, a name to remember for when he gets healthy again. Maybe place a small bid, but for now, I don't think he's good enough to stash, that's for sure. We are going to jump over to our main topic of the day, the job battle winners and losers, right after these messages from our sponsors, starting with Fantrax, which is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, score categories, scoring system, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more. And it's all free. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/RotoWire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. We're also brought to you by the NFBC RotoWire Online Championship. The NFBC RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Online Championship is live. Play fantasy baseball against your favorite RotoWire experts on NFBC this baseball season, and also probably some of your second favorite as well. Jeff Erickson, James Anderson, Clay Link, and more, like, me, will be competing in the RotoWire NFBC Online Championship for a shot at $150,000. Todd Zola also competing in that. He just streamed the Beat Todd Zola draft last night. Check that out on the RotoWire.com YouTube page. And sign up for a draft today at RotoWire.com/high stakes. That's RotoWire.com/high stakes. And welcome back to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, the final spring training edition of the show this year. We are talking about spring training job battles, winners and losers. Erik Halterman here with Ryan Boyer. And Ryan, You have been covering the AL job battles throughout the spring in our spring training job battles article series. I've got the NL, and I think for the rest of today's show, we're just going to alternate back and forth. You're going to give me an AL battle you're interested in. I'll give you an NL battle. So let's start with you. Who is the first American League job battle that listeners should know the winner of?
Red Sox closer battle looks like it's been decided. Going into spring training, we kind of thought Liam Hendriks probably has a slight edge, but he's not looked great this spring. Maybe that stuff will eventually come back for him, but looks like it's going to be Aroldis Chapman opening the year in the closer role for the Red Sox. I mean, Chapman's stuff is still really, really good. He's among the hardest throwers in the game, among the best bat missers in the game. I think he could hang on to that closer job, but he's also got terrible control, and especially a place like Boston, kind of a pressure cooker. If he has a stretch where his control just completely abandons him, they could look in another direction, but he's still pretty good. I think he could keep the role. I've been kind of pushing Garrett Whitlock because I think he's probably the best reliever in that bullpen, but I don't know that he's good enough to be worth a stash right away unless you're in a holds league. But yeah, Aroldis Chapman, move him up your board, and Liam Hendriks probably just a reserve round pick now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Aroldis Chapman in the main event is going at an average pick of 249. That's certain to rise with this news. He should pass Lucas Erceg, who is probably a setup man. He should pass Chris Martin, I think, who's not confirmed as a closer. He should pass AJ Puck, who is only in the mix with Arizona. He should probably pass Justin Martinez, who's in that same mix. I'm seeing a range where he might settle in. We've got Ryan Presley, 153, David Bednar, 155, Pete Fairbanks, 157, Alexis Diaz, 160. Does that seem right about the 150s in that range with some other closers who you aren't excited about but are definitely closers, or does he go even further than that?
That sounds about right. Maybe a little bit later than that. It probably just depends largely on the flow of your draft as well.
Carlos Estevez, 171, maybe around there.
Yeah, that seems about fair, I think.
But still in the tier of guys who you'd actually really not hate getting, right? If you're somebody who doesn't pay up for the early closers, you probably do need to think pretty hard about an Aroldis Chapman. I will go to the first NL job battle here, and that's the Braves' fifth starter. Well, fourth and fifth starter. Grant Holmes is the very buzzy name, and I think no reason to believe that he's not going to start with a job. He's got a 1.76 ERA this spring. 12 strikeouts against 7 walks is not great in 15 and a third innings, so I don't want to say he's having an amazing spring. AJ Smith-Shawver is having a good spring by those metrics, 20-5 strikeout to walk in 16 innings, a 3.94 ERA. Those seem to be the main candidates, but Ian Anderson, the fact that Ian Anderson doesn't have options, there's a suggestion that he was maybe going to be ahead of Smith-Shawver, and I think that's still the outstanding battle here. Do you give it to the guy with options who is really struggling by some metrics this spring? Ian Anderson has somehow, I'm just making sure that this line is correct, 2.65 ERA, but 8 strikeouts against 18 walks. 18 walks in 17 innings. I don't think that kind of guy is going to enter a starting rotation. So I think that I would be certainly drafting Grant Holmes as if he's in the rotation. And I think you can take the shot at AJ Smith-Shawver over Ian Anderson. And then the question is, who keeps the job once Spencer Strider comes back? And by then, it's going to be whoever's pitching best. I think Grant Holmes is seen as the favorite. But if you want to take a shot on Smith-Shawver late, if he's ahead of Anderson and he gets 2 or 3 starts before Strider gets back, and those starts are better than Grant Holmes' starts, I think there's a path to Smith-Shawver remaining in the rotation all year. How are you reading this Atlanta situation? Who seems like an attractive late round pick to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Holmes is definitely locked in, and they seem to be setting it up for Smith-Shawver to get that fifth spot. And Ian Anderson's going to be on the team just because they don't want to lose him. Have to pass him through waivers. Maybe they could try to do a phantom IL stint, but I suspect he'll just be in long relief for a while. Smith-Shawver's, looked awesome this spring. He's got the pedigree of a top prospect. Been kind of up and down during his chances in the majors, but still just 22. He was kind of rushed when he debuted. Largely only a kind of a 2-pitch pitcher. I think there's some questions about whether he'll be able to handle lefties over the long haul, but the stuff is certainly interesting, and on a good team, he'll have the opportunity to stick in the rotation if he pitches well. And at the very least, he should be on your radar as a late round flyer now.
All right, who you got as your next AL job battle?
Yep, sticking with the Red Sox. Someone in the chat mentioned earlier, I think the first question was thoughts on there you go, Red Sox second base battle. That one has not technically been determined yet. Alex Cora has been kind of weird with the media. I feel like this spring he doesn't really want to confirm anything. He's being kind of cagey, but it seems like it's going to be Christian Campbell. They're setting it up that way. He's been getting more and more looks at second base lately and got off to a really bad start, both offensively and defensively, but he's been trending up of late. So it looks like that's probably going to be his job. And kind of the whole Red Sox drama about Rafael Devers and Alex Bregman, that's basically been decided too. Although, again, Cora doesn't want to technically say that Devers is going to be the DH, but that's what's going to happen. And that's also going to mean that Masataka Yoshida is not going to have a job, at least initially. He's going to go on the IL probably at the beginning of the season. So any interest you might have had in him, in even in deeper formats, not terribly interested now. But the big news of those position groups is certainly Christian Campbell, if he does indeed get that job. He would be beating out, and they've already optioned Vaughn Grissom. So he's technically competing still with David Hamilton. And David Hamilton's has some interesting fantasy upside as well with that stolen base potential. I think he could still be viable in deep leagues. He could play enough bouncing around to different positions to get you enough steals. But certainly the big news is Christian Campbell looking like he's probably going to be their second baseman.
Yeah, encouraging for anyone who took a chance on Campbell, even though Campbell isn't having an amazing spring. It looks like he's going to have a shot here. Wanted to mention a point here made by Uncle Ted in the chat. Good news for Rafael Devers that he's going to be at DH, but has third base eligibility. Potentially, right? The injury risk should be lower if we figured he might, injure his shoulder on a throw from third base or something. But we also know research shows there is a DH penalty. Hitters do perform worse if they're a regular DH. It's just hard to, sit for 50 minutes and then suddenly get amped up for 2 minutes and then go back to the bench. Do you care much either way? Would you adjust Devers on your rankings now that we know he's going to have that DH penalty, but at least he probably isn't going to spend too much time in the field? Well, no might even be overstating, but let's say we did know.
I wouldn't really adjust it too much. You never know how players are just going to react differently. And that's just really tough to gauge, really tough to measure. So I wouldn't adjust a ton for that. I've been kind of starting to fade Devers just because his spring has just been so strange that they keep pushing back his spring debut and kept saying that he's just working on his mechanics after his shoulder issues kind of threw them off last year. That does seem to be the case. He's kind of working back in, but I wouldn't adjust too much just on DH only. But yeah, if the shoulders injuries don't linger, technically that would give him a better chance to stay healthy, I think, if he's only going to be in the DH spot.
All right, let's move to my next NL job battle here, which is the Mets second baseman, which may only be a temporary battle here. Jeff McNeil, I assume, will take the job back. He tweaked his oblique in March, but could be back mid-April. But I wanted to mention this one because there is a surprising favorite for this job, and it is not a second baseman. It's somebody who I did not even include when I wrote up this job battle a month ago. Brett Baty has spent a little bit of time at second in the minors, but he's pretty much a third baseman. But he's having such a good spring that it seems like he's going to be given a chance to open the year as the Mets' second baseman, probably on the large side of a platoon with Luis Angel Acuna starting against lefties. But Beatty has had a remarkable spring. As many walks as strikeouts, 5 of each of them, hitting .354 with an 1123 OPS, 3 homers. I mean, if you were at all willing to remain in on Brett Beatty, this is his chance, and he's looked great. Are you taking a chance on Brett Beatty late in drafts, or do you think he's going to start for about 1 week and then head back to the minors because he'll have the same 633 OPS he had last year?
Yeah, I mean, deep leagues, I think he's definitely worth a flyer. All indications are that his defense at second base has actually been pretty good, surprisingly. So it seems like they'll trust him with that job, at least initially. And he's always had interesting batted ball data, other than the fact that he hits on the ground too much, but generally hits the ball hard. Still only 25, certainly too early to give up on him. But as you mentioned, I got to think that Jeff McNeil's probably going to get that job back as soon as he's ready. He can play the outfield some as well, but that's also as long as Brandon Nemo's healthy, that's also a pretty crowded spot as well. They don't even have room for Starling Marte anymore, and Jesse Winker mostly going to be a designated hitter. But yeah, in deeper leagues, I think Brett Beatty's worthy of a flyer, but probably not beyond that.
Yeah, fair enough. Who is your next AL job battle for today?
We're going to do Royals' 5th starter. Looks like it's officially, well, not officially. I don't think Matt Quattro's come out and said it yet, but all signs point to Chris Bubic getting that 5th spot. They've been pitching Daniel Lynch in relief this week, kind of tipping their hand there. And I've been all over Chris Bubic in drafts this spring. Erik put together an article with different RotoWire writers with sleepers and busts, and Bubic was my sleeper pitcher in that article. Big on what he did last year as a reliever. That stuff is pretty much carried over this spring with the velocity and the new sweeper that he added last year. So really interested in Chris Bubic, and now that he's got that 5th starter spot wrapped up.
Yeah, Bubic is an interesting one because he was not good as a starter, and then he got hurt, and then he was incredible as a reliever. All of the peripherals were just about as good as it gets. And so you want to say he's going to be worse than that, certainly as a reliever, but how much worse? How much is he going to resemble the version of himself we saw as a starter? And he's added new pitches. He's a different pitcher than he was several years ago. So I think I'm willing to bet on Chris Bubic. Definitely want him as one of my final few starters on a lot of teams. Somebody I will not want as one of my final few starters is DJ Hertz. We've got the Nationals rotation battle as the next one on the list here. And I and many others liked DJ Hertz as a sleeper this spring because among the contestants for, should we call it the 5th starter in DC, maybe even the 4th starter, maybe even the 3rd, 4th, 5th starter, DJ Hertz was the only one who can strike batters out. He also had control problems, but do you want to bet on the guy who has a ceiling of being a 5th starter, or do you want to bet on the guy who has the strikeouts and the walks and hope that he improves the walks? I wanted to bet on that guy. Well, I still might want to bet on DJ Hertz later this season, but I'm going to have to wait until he comes back up. He has been optioned, and rather deservingly so. DJ Hertz in 9 2/3 innings this spring, 4 strikeouts against 9 walks. Not good at all, a 6.52 ERA. So still somebody who I want to see where his career takes him. I'm far from out on DJ Hertz, but the jobs have been won by Trevor Williams, who actually had pretty interesting underlying numbers last year before getting hurt. I don't mind Trevor Williams as a late round flyer. Michael Soroka, who had been turning some heads this spring, but I think then followed that up with some shakier outings. He's now at a 13-11 strikeout to walk rate this spring. So tempering my temporary interest in Michael Soroka there. I wouldn't be surprised if he heads back to the pen in place of DJ Hertz. And the final spot has been won by Mitchell Parker, it appears, who briefly had some neck stiffness earlier this spring. Mitchell Parker was fine, produced fine underlying numbers and a fine ERA of 4.29 last year a streamer type. Pretty much all these guys are streamers. I don't know. Are you interested in any of them as a priority target, or is it maybe Soroka? Did you see anything in that brief bit, or are you just going to stream these guys and hope that Hertz makes it back up eventually?
Yeah, I wouldn't say any of them are a priority. I'm still interested in what Soroka can do in the move back to the rotation. Seemed to find something in relief down the stretch last year and has shown flashes this spring. So I still like him as a late round flyer. Not really interested in Mitchell Parker. I still think Hertz is worth a reserve round pick probably. I think he said he was dealing with a dead arm phase this spring and velocity was down, so he just wasn't quite himself. Once he gets that back up, he's pretty interesting. Certainly a viable bat misser, and I would like to see him eventually get a shot in the Nationals rotation. I think he's probably still will eventually. But yeah, Mike Soroka, interested in as a late round flyer, but beyond that, not a terribly interesting situation. I'll move on to the Tigers. My next AL job battle. We kind of touched on it earlier when we were talking about the Parker Meadows injury, but the Tigers right field / DH spot now seems like Kerry Carpenter is probably going to play more in the outfield and right field, which would open up DH for Spencer Torkelson. I mean, this time last year, people were pretty interested in Spencer Torkelson coming off a 31 homer season, former #1 overall pick. And he was just an absolute disaster last year. I struggle to feign too much interest in him this time around too, but like he's still pretty young, hits the ball hard. Is he going to make enough contact? Like I mentioned earlier, like the Tigers lineup is pretty lackluster. They could use a kind of a reemergence from Spencer Torkelson. It seems like he'll get that opportunity, so I think he's worth at least a late round flyer, but I wouldn't be super interested beyond that.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's move to the NL, where I've got a quick one for you. Cubs third baseman. I think this job looked like it was going to be Matt Shaw's after the Cubs traded away Isaac Paredes in the Kyle Tucker deal and didn't bring in anybody else other than Justin Turner, who is really more of a first base / DH at this point. I guess they brought in John Birdie as well, but he's a utility infielder. Same with Vidal Brujan. Point is, it was pretty clear that the Cubs wanted Matt Shaw to be the guy. And even though he had a brief setback with injuries, it was an oblique issue that he was dealing with in February, he nonetheless was good to go by the Tokyo series even. And not only was Matt Shaw on the opening day roster for those early 2 games, he started at third base both games and bat 5th. Now, he didn't really do anything. I can't tell you that he's off to a good start, but the fact that he's batting 5th, that to me is pretty significant. That to me says that the Cubs view him as a key piece and not just as someone who they're hoping wins the job and they'll work him in, 3-4 times a week, batting him 7th, 8th, 9th, maybe even occasional starts at other positions. And the Cubs are setting up Matt Shaw to be the guy at third base. And if that's the case, I think he's a pretty good value where he's going in drafts. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's got that locked down. I mean, he just looked like a guy who didn't have much of a spring training and maybe he had some jet lag with the travel. But yeah, I'm still interested for sure in Matt Shaw. I think he's got that job, that everyday job. Plenty of power. I got some speed as well. But yeah, he's still going, as you mentioned, pretty late in drafts. So I think I'm not worried about him losing that job soon. I think he's going to have a pretty long leash. Uncle Ted mentions that Gage Workman has been awesome this spring. He has. That's accurate. I don't think he's a threat to Matt Shaw just yet. You never know how a rookie, a young guy is going to handle the spotlight right away, but I'm still very interested in Matt Shaw.
Yeah, Workman, a Rule 5 pick, should mention. So right. The Cubs are incentivized to keep him on the roster, but I don't think that he got a single plate appearance in Japan. So I think that he's just an option. Maybe he'll start against some tough righties or something like that.
Yep. Sticking with the Tigers for the next AL battle and that 4th/5th starter battle. Looks like it's been decided. Kenta Maeda, they are starting the year in relief. Kiter Montero has been sent to the minors. So Jackson Jobe, it seemed pretty clear that he was going to get a spot regardless, but now he's locked up a spot officially. And Casey Mize, who has had a really good spring, has got a spot as well. I actually think, based on where they're going, that Mize might actually be more interesting as far as value goes. We're still waiting to see as much upside as Jackson Jobe has. He had some control issues last year in the minors. He's had some issues staying healthy as well. The upside is huge with him. He came into camp with a new pitch as well this spring. So we'll see how that works out for him. The upside, massive. But Mize is more interesting. Despite being a number one overall pick, he's never really shown much bat missing pedigree. But I like that Tigers pitching development, and it's a good park to pitch in. So I think at the very least he is one of your last pitching spots. I think Mize should be on your radar now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Mize is somebody who had a ton of prospect pedigree at one point. He was the first overall pick. That's even more than Jackson Jobe, who was the third overall pick. For Mize, that was 2018. For Jobe, it was 2021. Mize also shows, though, that the path isn't always all that straightforward. And with Jobe coming off a kind of mediocre season in the minors last year, where the ERA and WHIP were good, but the real control problems, as you mentioned, and the strikeouts went down. We're no longer in those 30% range, 25.5%. Jobe's numbers aren't that convincing, and I think that's why he's still coming at a pretty affordable price. And you could take that either direction. You could say, yeah, he's a young pitcher who is already making improvements to his repertoire. Don't look too much at his numbers. Look at the scouting reports, look at the reputation, and figure this is going to be the year. Or you could say, you know what? He actually doesn't look that good yet. It might take some time for him to figure it out, like Casey Mize did. I'll just take Casey Mize. So a case for either of those guys. Moving back to the NL, got the Cubs' fifth starter, which, according to our depth charts and our latest note, the job has been won by Colin Ray. But I want to say it's not 100% certain yet, and maybe I'm out on an island here. Maybe I'm just too much of a Ben Brown fan. But Ben Brown was used in relief in the Tokyo series, in long relief. He was, I believe, the first guy out of the bullpen after Shota Imanaga. And you could read that in two ways. You could say, well, that was Craig Counsell using Ben Brown in the role that he intends to use Ben Brown this season. He's going to be, a fireman who throws 2+ innings out of the pen, often coming in right after the starter. He's going to pitch an important role, an important multi-inning role, but it's going to be a relief role, one of those roles that, unfortunately, isn't that useful in fantasy. That is one way to read it, and I think that's sensible. I think that's why our depth charts show him in the bullpen. But the other way to read it for Ben Brown is that when you have two games that are more than a week separated from the rest of your schedule, you want to use all your best pitchers in those games. You don't really care about what their role is going to be for the rest of the season. And the fact that Ben Brown was used in the Tokyo series, kind of shaky results, gave up some runs, also did strike out, I believe it was 5 batters in 2 2/3 innings. So if he was used in that role, is that because Craig Counsell views him as one of the team's most important pitchers? In which case, probably isn't going to spend a lot of the year in the rotation. So I'm not fully convinced that Ben Brown has failed to make the rotation. I think if that report comes out in the next day or two, I wouldn't be surprised, but it hasn't actually come yet. Maybe I think the most likely thing is that Ben Brown bounces between roles throughout the year, and it is Colin Ray to start. There's Javier Assad as well, who's going to miss the start of the year on the IL, but isn't going to miss a long time, I don't think. So maybe this is just a situation where we have to keep Ben Brown's name in mind, but shouldn't be drafting him yet. I don't know. Should I drop all the shares that I picked up in the reserve rounds? How are you reading this one?
I mean, if you have him as a reserve round pick, I would hold. I hope to be surprised, and he is named the fifth starter, but I do think it's probably going to be Colin Ray for now, and it's in large part too because I don't know that Ray is just a better fit probably for the fifth spot. I don't know how useful he would be out of the bullpen. Whereas Ben Brown I know he didn't fare well in that appearance in the Tokyo series, but that stuff can play up even more in shorter bursts. So I still am fairly bullish on Ben Brown over the long haul, but I do think he's probably going to be more that maybe fireman, bouncing back and forth, swingman type role. But if I'm going to take either of those guys in a draft, it's certainly going to be Ben Brown, even though he's probably likelier to wind up in relief at the start of the season.
Fair enough. I think you have an ex-Cub who's involved in your next job battle here.
Yeah, the Astros right field situation. Is Cam Smith going to be on the opening day roster? That's looking like a possibility. We've seen kind of conflicting reports on the likelihood of that actually happening. I know there was one, maybe local Houston TV guy that reported that the chances were good that he's going to win the right field job. Then one of the beat writers, Chandler Rome of The Athletic, said that seemed like it was more far-fetched that he could actually open up in right field. I mean, he's never played right field before until this spring. I think he played a little bit of left field in like the Cape Cod League, but that's his only outfield experience so far. But certainly Cam Smith has been a revelation during spring training with how good he has looked. And if the Astros are willing to put Jose Altuve in left field, I mean, could they put a third base prospect in right field? I wouldn't put it totally past them. I mean, Chas McCormick his stock has certainly taken a hit over the last year and a half. I would still think it's probably going to be McCormick on opening day. That would be my guess, but certainly it seems like we're probably going to see Cam Smith sooner rather than later. I guess it's also possible they could it's not an opening day, but maybe eventually consider moving Isaac Paredes to second base and putting Cam Smith at third base. I think they're going to find a way to put him in the lineup once they determine he's ready, and it could be opening day, probably not, but sooner rather than later, it looks like.
Yeah, we have a comment here in the chat from Uncle Ted who's sharing a sentiment that I've heard a couple places here. Cam Smith gives me major Jordan Walker vibes. I think mostly just the idea of, wait a second, this guy's got a really talented bat. Let's throw him out in the outfield. We need his bat in the lineup as soon as possible. And sometimes the bat gets hurt if you're trying to learn a whole new position and trying to, reach the majors faster than you would otherwise. Remember, Cam Smith just picked last year. He's played 32 career games as a professional. But, they're putting him out there for a reason. Do you think the upside with Smith is high enough that he's worth a stash, even if you think that maybe it's more likely than not that he's in the minors on opening day? Do you think he's somebody who's going to be a major difference maker, or is he just somebody who's going to sneak into the deep league roster battle?
I wouldn't be considering him in 12-team leagues yet, 12-team redrafts anyway. I think he should be picked definitely in 15 plus. 12 teams, probably not. I mean, as good as he's looked this spring, as you mentioned, the professional experience is just extremely limited. He's a really nice prospect, but we don't know that that's going to translate right away. So 12 teams, I think it's too much, but 15 plus, I would be considering him.
All right, fair enough. Let's actually jump down a little bit. I've been going east to west here, but we've had a question about somebody who is on the list. We were going to talk about the Giants' 5th starter spot, so we'll jump to the West Coast a little early here. It is now down to Landon Roop and Hayden Birdsong because Keaton Winn and Kyle Harrison have been optioned. And now Hayden Birdsong is somebody who I know our colleague James Anderson is a big fan of. Birdsong has real strikeout upside. You could tell a similar story to the Ben Brown deal, where Ben Brown has strikeout upside and the guys he was going against not nearly as much. Last year, Birdsong had a 28% strikeout rate, but a 14% walk rate in his 16-start debut, and that's just not starter territory. I don't think you can last as a starter with a 14% walk rate. But guess what he's doing this spring? Have you seen His walk rate recently, it starts with a 0.0% for Hayden Birdsong to go with a 42% strikeout rate. He's doing absolutely everything he can to win the job this spring. So is Landon Roop, though. Landon Roop is having quite a good spring himself. For Roop, he has 14 strikeouts against just one walk in 12 innings. So both of them are doing everything they can to win the job. Which way do you see this one going? The earlier talk was that it was Roop was the leading fifth starter candidate in mid-March, or early March, I guess I should say. So do we still say he is the top guy because he's done nothing to pitch his way out of the job? But again, Birdsong's been probably even better. I really want it to be Birdsong because of that strikeout upside, but I don't know if we can say for sure that it is. Do you have a read on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same camp as you and just hoping that it's Birdsong. I mean, you look at we already knew about the strikeout upside and 0 walks this spring. If he's actually turned a corner with the control, I mean, he could be a legitimate frontline starter. I don't know that we can count on that control improvement from Cactus League play to translating over, but certainly encouraging what we've seen from him. And Roop is, look good as well, but he's also has plenty of experience in the bullpen as well. That would be easy for them to just slide him into a relief role instead. I'm guessing that's what they're probably going to do. But I don't have a great read on the situation. And whoever gets that fifth job probably doesn't have an incredibly long leash, but I would lean towards Birdsong getting the job. I hope. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think basically the fact that Harrison and Wynn have already been sent down to make this from a 4-man battle to a 2-man battle, I think that's enough encouragement that I'm willing to be taking Hayden Birdsong in that sleeper range, knowing that it still might not be him. But I think we've shrank the battle enough that he's become much more interesting. Should we move back to the AL? Who's your next battle here?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the Mariners' second base situation. Going into spring training, it seemed like it was a job that was pretty much just going to be handed to Dylan Moore. But now the Mariners are making it sound like they would prefer to keep Moore in a utility role, and also hopes that Ryan Bliss has had a really interesting spring. He might now be in the kind of the pole position for that second base job. And Ryan Bliss has put up some interesting numbers in the minors. Smallish guy, but has some pop and certainly has speed as well. I think the speed is where he could potentially be a asset in fantasy leagues if he does win that second base job. The power is solid, but he's also going to be kind of thwarted by his home park. And probably would bat towards the bottom of the Mariners lineup. But I think both of those guys, Ryan Bliss and Dylan Moore, even if he is more of a super utility role, can be a handy guy to have around because he's going to steal a lot of bases when he is in the lineup, and he has eligibility at virtually every position. So I think he's a handy guy to have, especially in deeper leagues and your NFBC rosters where you don't have IL spots. He can be very useful. But yeah, Ryan Bliss is a guy who wasn't really on my radar coming into spring, but I think he is worth being there now. Could at the very least provide some speed from a late round pick.
Yeah, great late round speed sleeper Ryan Bliss. Could potentially say the same thing about Victor Scott, who is maybe going to win the Cardinals center field battle. This one has not yet been officially handed to him, but if you compare his performances this spring to the top alternative, Michael Ciani, somebody who took over the job from Scott last year when he won it perhaps a year or two prematurely and looked very much overmatched. Well, Scott this spring in 15 games has 4 homers, which is not his game. He also has 5 steals, a 12.25 OPS, 9 strikeouts, 8 walks. Compare that to Michael Ciani, who in 15 games is hitting 100 with 0 extra base hits, 14 strikeouts, 2 steals. So Scott performing far better than Ciani. If the Cardinals care primarily about spring training, Victor Scott has won this job. If they care about last year's full season, though, Siani did take the job from Scott because Siani wasn't exactly a good player or anything, but he's a strong glove in center, and Scott is as well, but Scott really didn't look like he could hit. There's the other option here, which is just to play Lars Nootbaar in center. He can handle it. He's on that corner / center field line, and that would allow Brendan Donovan and Nolan Gorman both to start. Gorman at second, Donovan in left. But do you think it is going to be Victor Scott? Are you buying the buzz? What are you hearing as a Cardinals fan?
I don't think it's going to be Victor Scott, but I don't have strong feelings about it. From what I was about to say Cardinal sources, but it's not really Cardinal sources. Talking to one of their beat writers, kind of trading DMs with him, his guess is that it's going to be Siani in center field, but he also didn't have strong feelings about it. He also intimated that Oliver Marmol, the manager, really doesn't want to play Nootbaar in center field on a regular basis.
Interesting.
But he also, in their Cardinals kind of transition, whatever you want to call it, year, there might be more people in the room making those decisions, and it might not be totally Marmol's call as far as who plays center field. So I hope it's Victor Scott. As you mentioned, he looked overmatched last year, but I'm hoping he might have just been rushed, and he can still cash in on some of that upside. But as you mentioned, 4 homers this spring, but if it's going to be his speed that's going to be a difference maker if he does win the job. I think even if he's maybe third on the totem pole in center field initially, or at least that's the perception, that I think he's still worthy of a late round pick just because that speed upside is so high. But my gut says it's going to be Siani in center field and Nootbaar in left field. But I also thought that they were going to trade Nolan Arenado and they were going to kind of free up some of that logjam, and that never happened. So we will see how that situation shakes out.
Right. Move how about your next AL situation? What do we got?
Let's go to the Rangers. Speaking of center field, is this a battle? The Rangers center field job? Everybody wanted to hand it to Evan Carter, and I still think it's probably going to be him. But Evan Grant, one of the beat writers for the Rangers, said something interesting in an article recently, that it had seemed kind of maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago that there had been kind of momentum building that they might send Carter back to the minors. Just his swing didn't look great this spring. His numbers this spring still are not good. But then he kind of put together a nice stretch between minor league games and some hard hit balls that resulted in outs during Cactus League play that they're kind of now back on being more favorable with him. I still think it's probably going to be Evan Carter opening in center field, Leota Taveras going more of a fourth outfielder role. But I could see that being kind of a late camp surprise where they decide to send Evan Carter down for a little bit, get his swing right after missing so much time last year. I was interested in him going into spring as kind of a bounce back candidate. I mean, it's still a lot of pedigree there. A little less interested now just because he just hasn't looked very sharp at the plate. And there's some questions about whether he actually has a job. Dynasty still in on him, but redrafts not so much anymore with Evan Carter.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Moving on to the Reds and their closer situation. Wasn't clear that this was going to be a job battle because Alexis Diaz has been the guy for most of the last 2 years, but he was much worse last year, particularly in some of those underlying numbers. It looked like he was declining even faster than some of those surface stats. And I think it's becoming a battle. Alexis Diaz is having a terrible spring. Was even moved to pitch in some minor league games. I believe it's 1 strikeout against 5 walks in his 3 1/3 spring innings. So that's opening up the possibility that the Reds could go with somebody else in the 9th inning as soon as right away. Again, this is a tricky one to follow because this is one that feels like it ought to be a job battle, but it's not clear that the Reds are explicitly saying Diaz is gone by opening day. And there's not an obvious next man up. My favorite next man up would be Taylor Rogers. I grabbed him for $1 in Tout Wars NL. He has experience closing in the past. Also is a lefty, which maybe hurts his chances a little bit, but he has 230 save seasons on his resume. So I think Taylor Rogers could certainly do it. Emilio Pagan has been mentioned. I'm not sure I'd have him as a strong option. Scott Barlow went to $1 to Christian Cockcroft, who reviewed the Tout Wars NL only draft with me on Thursday's episode. That's Tristan's preferred alternative here. Barlow having a pretty decent spring. His velocity is maybe back up after it was going down the last couple seasons. Tony Santillan also went for $1 in the NL only league. And there's another name who wasn't drafted, but I could see it, suggested in the chat here by Jordan, Graham Ashcraft, somebody who the stuff metrics have loved for several years, but who just hasn't been able to put it together as a starter. It would surprise me if he moves to the back of the bullpen right away, but would it surprise me if he earned at least a few saves this year? No. So I don't really know what to do with this one. I don't even know if it's officially a job battle or just one that really feels like it ought to be very soon. But the point is here, I'm definitely not very excited about taking Alexis Diaz. He better be at the very back of the guys who have jobs now if I'm going to take him. And if I do, I would want to back him up with probably Rogers, maybe Barlow, maybe somebody else. How are you reading this one, Ryan?
Yeah, Zach Maxwell and super deep leagues too. Keep an eye on him. He's a Reds prospect who throws 100 miles an hour and just looks like a closer. He's not going to get the job now, but just down the line, he's a guy to keep in mind. As far as opening day, I think it's probably going to be Diaz still initially, but I don't say that with much confidence at all. Terry Francona has no loyalty to Alexis Diaz, and he sounded. I didn't hear the actual audio or video of his comments after Diaz's last appearance, but just from the quotes, he just kind of sounded exasperated by how Diaz looked. There was also an article in the Cincinnati Enquirer. One of the Reds beat writers kind of intimated that Diaz showed up in camp out of shape and has kind of rubbed people the wrong way. He was also on the trade block over the offseason. Maybe they were trying to sell him off before his value really tanked. That's kind of the vibes I kind of get with him. Having said that, I do think he'll probably still have the job on opening day, but I'm with you that Rogers is probably the next guy in line. I like Tony Santillan a lot. He had a kind of a sneaky great year in his first full-time year as a reliever last season. So I think he's interesting as well as a reserve pick. I would be interested in him, but guessing it's Diaz's job. But I like Taylor Rogers as a late round pick. Sticking with the Rangers for my next AL job battle. Rangers dealing with lots of rotation injuries, and thankfully, at least none of them is to Jacob deGrom, at least currently.
Right.
Cody Bradford.
I haven't checked in the last 10 minutes, but I think we're okay.
Cody Bradford dealing with a sore elbow, which is a bummer. I have a lot of investments in him. And John Gray had a fractured wrist, so he's already been put on the 60-day IL. He's going to miss the first couple months of the season. But that means that both Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter should have spots in the Rangers opening day rotation. Jack Leiter has looked really good this spring. He's throwing even harder than he was last year. He's added a changeup and a two-seamer, or maybe a curveball and a two-seamer. Still not sure what exactly to think of Leiter. The track, I know the pedigree has been there, but the track record in the minors overall has not been great. The control, especially. But he is a guy who it would not surprise me if he just figures it out and takes off. He's got certainly the stuff to do that. Kumar Rocker looks surprisingly great down the stretch last year after coming back from Tommy John. He's looked fairly shaky this spring, but his last outing was really promising. Hopefully that was a nice step in the right direction for him. I would prefer Rocker of the two. I think they're both worthy of late round picks, but we don't know what the leash is on the rotation jobs for them. Tyler Mahle had a forearm thing. It looked like he might need some IL time too, but he kind of bounced back from that pretty quickly. But it is a rotation when you factor in DeGrom, when you factor in Mahle. John Gray's already hurt again. Cody Bradford coming back from an elbow issue. There should be spots there for them to keep both of those guys. Talking about Rocker and Leiter to keep that job if they pitch well. Wouldn't want to be fully invested into either of them, but they're both certainly worthy of late round picks, and I would prefer Rocker out of the two of them.
Yeah, I'd be interested in either of them, certainly. Guys who have a lot of potential. Wasn't clear what their role was going to be early in the season. You were going to want to pick them up when they got their chances, and, well, turns out you're not going to need to pick them up. You can just go at them right now in your draft if you are still yet to draft. I'm going to go with the Diamondbacks Closer for my second to last NL job battle here. And this is a job battle which will continue into the year. It looked like it was between Justin Martinez and AJ Puk. I was on Justin Martinez because, man, he's got closer stuff. Triple-digit heat, triple-digit sinker, right? He keeps the ball on the ground at an elite rate and strikes out right around 30% of opposing batters. Walks a few too many, but I think that's okay when you've got elite bat missing ability and elite contact management. I still think Justin Martinez is the closer of the future in Arizona, and the team just signed him to an extension that gives them club options for his first two free agency years, which to me is an effort to cost control the guy and say, don't worry about what role we use you in. You're going to get paid. We don't have to give you saves now. You'll still get paid anyway, but also we can give you saves without worrying about it impacting your salary too much. That deal should just allow the Diamondbacks to use him in whatever way makes the most sense. AJ Puk, though, has looked like a closer with the Diamondbacks as well, at least when he moved to the bullpen last year, even while he was still with the Marlins, he was excellent. So those two options could both not look out of place in the ninth inning. And it sounds like Kevin Ginkel and Joe Mantiply are in the mix as well. So Torey Lovullo, I think, is eventually going to settle on a closer. It seems like that's his preference, and I think that we can take him at his word when he says we're not going to decide on opening day and we're going to let their performances sort it out, which I think means what? Both Justin Martinez and AJ Puk as the leading candidates are both still draftable, right? You just have to make sure they come at a discount because neither of them is the guy today.
Yeah, I mean, I've that when I saw that extension for Justin Martinez, my first thought was he's probably going to be the closer. That seemed like them tipping their hand. Maybe that's a misread on my part. From our past podcast that I like both of those guys. I prefer Puk, but that extension, I think, probably tipped the scales for me back towards Martinez because I think either one of those guys are good enough to do the job. A little worry about Martinez's control, but as you mentioned, when you have that pedigree of that quality of stuff and combine that with ground ball tendencies, you can get away with that.
Would you do what Jordan suggested here? Would you do what Jordan suggested in the chat? Just take both of them and then hope it's not Kevin Ginkel who ends up winning the job somehow?
If you can afford to do that, I do like that strategy because, like I said, I really like both of those guys, and I'm with you that I think Torey Lovullo would prefer to settle on one guy. And like I said, I've been leaning towards Puk, but I think that extension probably tips the scales in Martinez's favor, and either one of them could do the job, but that's an interesting strategy to take a shot on both of those guys and just hope you don't really want to use the handcuff approach when it comes to closers always, but they're going late enough that might be a viable strategy, especially since, either one of them could do the job and do it well. My final AL job battle, I have Yankees 5th starter written down, but it's really Yankees 4th and 5th starter because Clark Schmidt is going to go on the IL to begin the year. He's still coming back from a shoulder issue. Seems like it's going to be a short stint on the IL for Clark Schmidt. So Carlos Carrasco and Will Warren will get their opportunity to make probably at least a couple starts each to see who deserves to stay in the rotation once Clark Schmidt is ready. And Carlos Carrasco has looked good this spring. Not interested in him outside of the very deepest of leagues. Will Warren is much more interesting. I think he could potentially have some staying power. He's didn't have great numbers on the whole last year, either at the major or minor league level, but still misses bats, and he's looked great this spring. It had seemed like he was probably headed back to the minors prior to news that Schmidt was going on the IL. So maybe that means he's slightly down in the pecking order behind Carlos Carrasco, but just going to depend on how those two guys pitch over the next couple of weeks while Schmidt is out. And I assume they'll just go with the guy who's pitching better at the time. And I suspect that's probably going to be Will Warren.
Yeah, I thought that there were enough injuries already before the Clark Schmidt injury that Will Warren was just going to make the rotation, but it really started to look like Carlos Carrasco was maybe ahead of him. So he now does need that Schmidt injury to get his chance. But I'm with you. I think after the first 3 starts, if Warren has outpitched Carlos Carrasco, I'm pretty sure Warren's the guy. And I think that's pretty likely to happen. Wrapping up today's job battle show, I've got the Dodgers 5th starter, which was won a week or so ago by Dustin May, but it was one for now, and that's my question to you: is what are you going to do with a late draft, now that we know who the Dodgers 5th starter is? We know it's Dustin May, but Landon Knack will be an option eventually. He's hanging out in the minors to stay stretched as a starter. Ben Kasparius could start some games. He's on the roster as a reliever right now, and Tony Gonsolin doesn't look like he'll be out for long. He's on the IL, but it's a back issue. No indication that I've seen that it's going to be a long-term absence for Tony Gonsolin. And Dustin May, looking at him in the main event, going at pick 266. Some starters going on either side of him within a round or so are some guys who are definitely going to be in the rotation for much longer, like Ranger Suarez, Ronel Blanco, Bowden Francis, Justin Verlander, Nick Martinez, Mitch Keller. So Dustin May presumably has got much more upside than those guys, but he's never thrown very many innings at all. Definitely never triple digits. Let me make sure I've got his career max on here. He's never thrown more than 56 innings. So if you're even betting on Dustin May to throw 60, that would be a career high. But his stuff is nasty, as Jordan says here. And he's got the job now for the best team in baseball. So what exactly do we do with that now that we actually know the winner of the Dodgers 5th starter job battle?
Yeah, those names you mentioned that he's being taken around, I think I would prefer all of them over May. And that's coming from a guy who, when we did our ERA category sleepers, included Dustin May, because I'm confident that when Dustin May pitches, he's going to be good, because when he's pitched, he's been good, and he's also on a very good team. But what is the workload going to look like? We have absolutely no idea how many starts he can actually make. And the Dodgers, as we know, they don't need Dustin May to be good. I think they've officially clinched the division already after going 2-0 in their first 2 games. But yeah, Dustin May is also going to be a free agent after this season. I mean, I guess personally he's got incentive to stay healthy and show he can pitch a full season, but I don't know that the Dodgers really care about that incentive for him. They're going to do what's best for them. And I think that's probably going to include just filtering guys, kind of have a revolving door in that fifth spot in the rotation and sixth spot in the rotation once Shohei Ohtani's pitching as well. As I mentioned, I would rather have those other guys that are going around Dustin May. If it's late enough, though, I mean, as I mentioned, and you mentioned, he's got the job now. We're pretty confident he's going to be good when he has the job and when he's pitching innings. So deeper leagues, late round pick, he's worth it. We just can't count on him holding up and remaining in that rotation for any significant period of time.
All right, that's pretty much our show here. We've run out of time, but there was a good question from Adam that I want to end the show on. We mentioned a whole bunch of fifth starters in particular. So if there's just one or two fifth starters that we mentioned today who you would make a priority target for a end of draft pick, last round or two, somebody who you think has got some upside, and if they fail to win the job or it doesn't go very well, you can just drop them in April. Of all the fifth starter types that we mentioned today, I mean, Michael McGreevy maybe up there. Hayden Birdsong for the strikeout upside. Who do you have?
Yeah, I would lean Birdsong. It's funny that they, McGreevy and Birdsong are kind of polar opposites as far as their repertoires, and but Birdsong, the strikeout upside is just so high in at least this spring, showing signs that maybe his control is getting better. I do think McGreevy might have figured something out late last year, and he could at least maybe miss bats at like a league average rate. And if he does that, his control should be good enough to make him useful. I think he's worth a late round pick as well, but Birdsong would be the guy that I would go with.
Bubic too, maybe. I think Chris Bubic probably one of the priorities among the guys we mentioned. I mean, there's a whole bunch. We're about to just list all of them again, but
I mean, Bubic wasn't even on my radar when that question was posed, just because I've already kind of locked him in my head.
Right.
As getting that rotation spot, but yeah, I would put him on the top if we're including him as well.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for today's show, and it's going to do it for our spring training coverage from me and Ryan. Really excited that next week we'll be starting up our waiver wire episodes. Very excited for those. We'll be going for the next 6 months. We don't have to plan any topics for quite some time. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out in the chat here. We're excited to be with you all year on the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax.